Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Wilfred Riley. Joining us again on the recurring basis here is Christy Kelly. And our guest this week, is this the third time? How many times have we
Second
done?
time. Second time.
Okay, we got to do it again. Is Jeremy Adams. He is so much more than just a high school teacher or a DC comic writer. Oh, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry, wrong one. Author of the wonderful book Hollowed Out. Pick it up if you haven't read it. But he's here because he has a book coming out this week on Tuesday. Pick it up. It is called Lessons in Liberty. 30 rules. Now, I told him that was a lot of rules. We're going to sift through them here. 30 rules for living from 10 extraordinary Americans. Jeremy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Love talking to you guys.
It is good to have you on. This book is interesting in a way that it's kind of a detour from the books that we get now, that in the nonfiction pseudo political kind of realm. I mean, it's more self-help than political, but it is, kind of reflecting on where we are as a country and taking politically known people, for the most part, to say what they can teach us and what we can learn. So why did you write the book, and why is it so much more uplifting than all the other crap out there?
Well, the last book was kind of all doom and gloom, if I'm being honest. You know what I mean? It was all about all the things that are hollowing out the souls of our children. And one of the questions I got, 2 or 3 years ago when that book came out was, well, what are we going to do about it? It's great that you're identifying all these problems, but we're the solutions. And so, in the last year or two, I would say that, a lot of the information coming out about young people, a lot of the more recent statistics that you see are just even more depressing, frankly. I know some of the most commonly quoted statistics, things like 40% of Gen Zers see the founding fathers as villains. The most recent one I saw that literally, I think average people they just want to scream, is 1 out of 3 Gen Zers find Osama bin Laden's ideas a force for good in the world. I mean, just absolute lunacy, insane. Normal people don't know what to say about it. Only 52% of Americans say that they would actually defend the country if it was invaded. Again, I mean, just absolutely demoralizing statistics about the way that young people see their country. But the thing, Charles, is this book isn't just about young people. I mean, it's not just the young people. And I know you're not, I hate to tell you this, bud, you're not young anymore. Will's not young anymore. None of us are young anymore. And a lot of Americans are not really happy with their lives, with the country. One of the statistics that I just find so demoralizing is that 30% of Americans today are broadly dissatisfied with their lives. That's a new thing. In 2002, it was only 10%. And so, we live in this extraordinary country, in this extraordinary civilization, and we have this gift of human liberty, but a lot of people don't know how to use it. And they don't know how to use it well. And I really believe that we have a shortage of inspiration in our lives, and that's what I'm trying to supply in the book.
So, wow, that is a lot. A lot for you to try to do within the pages of the book, to try to get people to find some positivity, both in their lives, which is a lot, but also in the about the country. What do you think, Will, about, before we get to the book, about the stats that he mentioned? About you talk about this sometimes, about what people think, how people wouldn't defend the country. That's a weird one, because if they're coming attacking the country, they're coming for you. So It's kind of like defending yourself, but they're like, nah, this country sucks. Go ahead, tear it down. And all those kind of things. What do you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of it's just the result of ignorance. I mean, so the stats are all accurate. I mean, I think we got a pre-draft of this book. Jeremy's long-term teacher, good stats guy. I mean, that is accurate. 31% of people feel it. The language is like deep anomie or something like that. Like, there's no point to life. They don't. And you see this stress, like, people can't figure out how to mate anymore. Like parents have always criticized their kids for like fighting and having sex too much, and like you don't give them the car, you can't trust the little bastards. No, it's the exact reverse of that. There are these serious articles in like National
Yeah.
Review, like high school juniors aren't getting laid. What's the problem? Like people don't know how to talk to girls, people don't know how to physically defend themselves. Football, varsity tryouts have dropped 50%. So we are seeing this. We're seeing an apathy throughout the country. The 50% wouldn't defend the country. I'm not surprised by that at all. I would also question how many people could. I mean, if you've talked to anyone who's a military recruiter, I mean, one of their comments is that the traditional source populations, white and black males, I mean, at least in the South, you got about a 50% criminal charge rate for both of those. Like, how many guys could even go into the military? So 42% for whites, 51% for black males. So, I mean, there are all these issues. I think a lot of this gets into deep ignorance, which is why I actually want to dig into the book. But, like, I think a lot of people are out there searching, and in the absence of like a story to give your life meaning, which is the point of religion and also the other great traditions, by the way, like Stoicism, Bushido, so on, the world just seems to be like a confusing forest full of evil people and things you don't know how to do and so on down the line. And a lot of people don't have that basic animating story. Like, I don't want to go on a rant about this, but if you ask people to name 10 great Americans, like what did Geronimo do? Henry Ford do? The Wright brothers do? What did Thomas Jefferson do? Anyone but George Washington and Martin Luther King? They wouldn't know. You want to talk about spirituality. What are 10 things Jesus said? Okay, you think that's a little cliche? What are 10 things Buddha said? People just don't know. And I think in that absence, there's the old kind of corny line, devil finds work for idle hands. I think that it's more than that. There's a depression, there's a potentiality for evil, really, that goes on when your mind is idle, when you don't know anything. Your natural desires in the absence of training generally aren't that good. Got a little deeper than I expected, but I mean, yeah, people don't know shit. It's a problem for the country. Like
Right.
it
And when
really is
Jeremy
just
was, and you can speak to that or anything else you want to point out, Christy. But one thing I do want to let you know is that when Jeremy was here last time, he mentioned that, and Will and Jeremy talked about that. And because in his last book, he said it was mostly doom and gloom. He talked about that, not just the point of what Will made, which is true, but the bad part is that he's like, when we were teenagers, we weren't that bright either, right? But we didn't have the level of both nihilism and hubris all combined in one. So they don't want to know anything. He's like, they're happy not knowing anything. They will brag about not knowing anything. So it's different from that respect. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I was going through the book, I mean, I have a one that just graduated high school, and then I have another one that's going to be a sophomore. And I'm like, I'm totally going to buy the physical copy and put a little bow on it, especially for actually for both of the younger girls, because this is the type of book that you can say, we're arguing about what should be taught in history, what shouldn't be taught, but instead of arguing about that, I mean, I think parents need to kind of take the lead and say, hey, here is what you need to know about what true Americans, what to look for in great Americans. Here are
Right.
the lessons that I want you to have. I think the book is excellent for that. I will also say, a lot of days now, because of TikTok, our kids, not only do they have a short attention span, but they're used to giving the information fast and quick and in a hurry. And I think your book, the way it's laid out, is perfect for high schoolers. Like,
Mhm.
give it to them quick, give it to them what they need to know, instill the good lessons. And it's not a book that, it meets them where they are.
Right. Right. So Jeremy, how did you pick the people to write about? I mean, there's a lot of great Americans. You know that we are very partisan in the country now. So if you wrote about too many conservatives or liberals, that'd be bad. You got to have you got to have the diversity army around and make sure you cover everything. So, but you have a message and a point you're trying to make. You're trying to pick things that we can take from people that can be used to improve the country and improve lives. And so that had to work in and be the main focus. So how did you pick the people?
Well, I mean, it was, well, the thing about it is I didn't want, like you said, Charles, I didn't want this to be seen as a liberal book or a conservative book. I mean, I think our country is big enough that it's just an American book. And I know that sounds corny and that sounds like a cliche, but my God, it's true. And you wanted to kind of take this huge tapestry of American history, different races, different centuries, different backgrounds, different ideologies, and say no matter where we are in our lives, they have something to offer us that can really inspire us. I mean, I think Will was absolutely right when he talked about how there's this just malaise, there is this unhappiness. And I know you said you have a high school senior, which is that's what I teach, by the way. I teach 5 periods of high school seniors a day.
Oh, God bless you.
I am so ready for the end of the year. I can't even tell you. It's not that I don't love my seniors, but man, don't let the door hit you in the behind right now, because they are just ready to be done too. But, some of the statistics that you read, I mean, they're truly unfathomable. There's a few, and I'm sure, I see this in the classroom. It's like, it's one thing when the Atlantic or the New York Times or whoever publishes these articles, but it's very different when you see it manifest in front of you. If I wanted to be bitter, and I'm not, I'm not a bitter person at all, but I do kind of feel like 3 years ago when Hollowed Out came out, and Charles knows what I'm talking about, I was called a right-wing nut job, because I was talking about how lonely the kids are, the mental crisis. I talked about how addicted they were to their phones 3 years before a book called The Anxious Generation came out. And I kind of feel like, that was considered conservatism back then. Now everybody owns it, because half of teenagers now say things like, I don't enjoy my life. My life is not very valuable. The one that I came across about, 9 months ago, I don't know if you guys have ever come across a statistic so shocking, you have to read it over and over, is that 1 out of 4 18 to 25-year-olds in this country have considered suicide. Think about that. We all remember what it was like to be young, man. When you decide, my God, I want to take my life seriously, when you're entertaining ideas for the first time, and Will said it too. These kids don't know how to talk. They don't know how to socialize. You want to know why people aren't getting together in the 20s? It's because dudes can't flirt, and they don't want to flirt because they're afraid of being called creepy by the girls. And then, when you see them interact in the classroom, even if you have a day when you're like, okay, guys, you have 15 minutes left, they will talk for a few minutes. And after a few minutes, man, zombie land, they just slowly, it's like there's a base, and they all kind of filter down to that base of not talking, being on their phones, not knowing how to interact. And I'm sorry, that's going to make you unhappy. And so, I really believe, and again, I know it sounds kind of weird, but when you're young, you've got to find something that I think to a certain degree informs your sense of what you want to do with your life. We all remember what it was like, Charles, to read a book for the first time, or have a professor, or listen to a sermon, or have a conversation where we said, my God, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be like that person. I want to pursue that goal. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what they know. And that, I just imagine a generation that doesn't know what that feels like. They're not tethered to things that are bigger than themselves. And I think that's really how we get meaning and purpose in our lives, is by looking what other people do and having, we are creatures who learn by example, right? And we're either improved or depraved by the examples in front of us. And that's what I was really trying to do with the book. And I thank you for the kind words. I am trying to get this message and these lessons out for all ages, but especially young people, so that they can make the most out of freedom. Again, I don't want to go on and on, but there is this weird duality about freedom, right? So you might say, oh, I believe everybody's free. I believe in the Declaration of Independence. That's great. That's fine. But if you can't tie wisdom to freedom, if you can't tie morality to freedom, then freedom just becomes chaos, right? Liberty just becomes licentiousness. And that's what you see in our schools. That's what you see in our cities. That's what you see in our civilization, is that people are free, but they're not wise. They're not inspired. And that's why they're so unhappy. And that's why I think we need the book.
If I can jump in there briefly with one thing, like one of the points you said, I actually think is pretty deep here. And I mentioned that you did, that's an accurate statement, but you wrote about this a little before. What was it? Pinker did the focus on phones. He did some decent quantitative work on that. But I think that there's a whole conversation about why people aren't talking and interacting. And people tend to bring in a lot of this culture war bullshit. Like, men will always blame feminism by like minute 2, and women will respond by blaming like online pornography, and people will yell at each other. I don't think either of those things has been like great for society, if we're talking about like the later waves in the feminist case. But like, no, it's a much more simple. Like, people have fewer hours It's like 10,000 hours will make you a master in almost
Yep.
anything, martial arts or whatever, cooking. In my case, is one of the things I'm trying to do. We don't have people that have spent 10,000 hours interacting with other people. You used to not be able to avoid it. Like you lived with both parents who didn't always like each other that much, or they loved each other. Grandpa's got an upstairs room. You got three brothers.
Great point.
You know, you go to school, you're on the team. Like it or not, you're just going to do that shit. You're going to talk to the coach. We don't do that as much anymore. Like human interactions drop by about 70%. So when people say you can't just blame it on the phones, I don't see why not, actually. Like I would assume that people are much better at like online kind of game spitting. Like I remember getting love notes in high school. They were just like, see you after school. You know why? You know, people are probably much better than that on Tinder. But in terms of actually talking to each other, they seem to lack all skill. And I've asked mentees this, joking around playing basketball or golf, like how would you quote unquote initiate at a bar? You know, it's Mother's Day's coming up. What are you going to do for your mom? And it's just kind of this awkward wall, like, oh no, bro. I mean, you know, got to be something out there. Got to be a website for that. It's just like, no, you just do that shit. But like, people don't know how to. Mockery isn't even the right response. It's just you haven't been trained.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is that like, a lot of young people, I mean, you reflect the voices you're listening to, right? I mean, and that's like you made a great point there about how, 100 years ago, young people were not around other young people all day, right? I mean, they were around mom and dad. What do? They worked, they took care of the family, they took care of the house. Grandparents lived there too. And you saw what old age was supposed to look like, right? So you absorbed the values and the expectations of what it means to be a parent, a grandparent, a worker, a mom, a dad. You learn how to talk. Hey, by the way, you learn how to fight too, by the way. I mean, here's a little headline for everybody. You got to, if you're married, even if you have a great marriage like mine, man, there are times when you don't like each other. How do you deal with that? And this, you're so right that like when you talk about what young people are listening to, they're listening to other young people all day. That's why they sound stupid, right? The voices they're listening to are not, well, the sure heck don't listen to their teachers because they're perpetually monomaniacally, manically.
They're also listening to online weirdos, not to jump in and break up a good line of thought. But like, I mean, I watched a feminist friend earlier today shared a video of like, what's his name? Jeffrey Marsh, the dude that talks to kids about like gender transitions. And a lot of these people that are very popular in online spaces are the biggest possible loonies, like people that would have been chased out of a traditional working class neighborhood by a mob of dads. So like very often you have this situation where it's either your idiot friends at school or nothing, you're staring at a phone, playing one-piece shooters, or you're listening to information from fringe radicals that wouldn't have been platformed by anyone until recently. And a lot of the male-female dating discourses of this kind of thing, like Andrew Tate the other day said it was gay to love sex with women. Like that's the type of shit you get. That's a direct quote. I'm not Andrew Tate. I mean, but so it's like if you're online, if you're on Twitter, TikTok, which by the way, parents, you shouldn't be till I was 16 or whatever, at least. But I mean, if you're on there, you're getting a bunch of this kind of crap, like the craziest adults in the world spitting nonsense to you as versus your parents, your real friends, your older brother, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I have this debate in my brain, and I'd like to know what the other parents on the on the podcast think here. Sometimes I can't decide if Gen X parents, and I'm a proud Gen Xer, by the way. I don't know if Charles is kind of an older Gen Xer. I don't.
Hey,
don't know. I'm kind of
Jeremy Adams.
I'm just asking.
But he's got to be right. I mean,
you know like exactly how old I am, Jeremy. That's mean.
I don't. Did you tell me? I don't remember.
You don't believe me when I told you. I'm 5 years older than you.
You're 42? No way. No way. I don't believe it at all.
I'm 42 if you're 37, which no one's buying. But go on.
But no, I mean, here's the thing. I'm a proud Gen X.
Well known. I can just Google how old you are like while you're arguing. Let me check this out.
I mean, you know what? If Charles Love gets a Wikipedia entry before me, I owe him dinner. There's no question. And you can't. And Charles, you can't do it yourself. That doesn't count. You can't go on and do your own Wikipedia entry. But in all seriousness, like I can't tell if Gen Xers are the absolute worst parents in human history because because of all the problems that our children are having, or maybe we're just because I don't like to blame myself. I do feel like we have inherited an absolute crap show of epic proportions. I loathe the technology, the values. Will was talking about the weirdo voices that they absorb all the time. Like, I am tired of fighting my own damn culture to raise normal, adjusted children. And I'm tired of fighting the zaniness to teach regular kids regular lessons about America and our values. And I just feel like our generation has been given just all of these crappy influences that we have to fight about, because my kids don't listen to me. My students don't listen to me. They're listening to all these 90 voices at night, and they're scrolling for hours a day. And by the way, what gets all the attention on social media? It's not the voices that I'm writing about in the book. It's not Thomas Jefferson.
Negativity.
It's not Arthur Ashe. It's negativity and outrage and being pissed off. Now, if you're super witty like Will, and I mean, that guy, I don't know, your Twitter game is so friggin' great.
I mean, it's insane, isn't it?
I know. It is insane how good his Twitter game is. And I just bow down because I can't get 2 likes on mine, but whatever, I mean, but the point is that, the things that really get attention on social media are not the things that nourish the soul. They're not the things that are really good for us and help us in kind of cultivating a question of who we want to be in this life. And it makes me very sad because, Will said, don't give them to their 16. So true. I made a colossal mistake. All this writing that I do, I think if you put me on the couch with a psychiatrist would say, it's a lot of guilt because you screwed up. You gave your kids phones too early. You let your kids have their phones in class for a few years before you became kind of tyrannical about it. And I'm trying to make up for it because I made these mistakes because I feel like all of these forces that are bigger than me are defeating me. And it's frustrating. And maybe I shouldn't admit that in public, but that's really where I think a lot of this impulse to write and to speak and to have this megaphone. And again, I'm not famous. I'm not good on Twitter. And so it's hard for me to kind of get the voice out there. And that's why I really do hope this book does well. Cause I can't be somebody's dad besides my own children. I can't somebody else. I can only teach my own students. I can't change the culture, but I can hopefully create stories that inspire us because that's how people learn is through stories.
Well, we got to get to Christy. We got to get the book at some point. But Christy, I got to get a response to that. What do you think about the parenting? What do you say?
Yeah, to answer your question, Gen X parents were pretty bad. So I think it's some of both. I think it's definitely the outside influences, but I think that we became the generation where, we left our kids at daycare till 6 o'clock, till after school care, right?
Yep.
Both parents, started working full-time jobs
Yep.
instead of maybe mom being in the house, being there after school. We're the generation that felt like it was okay for video games all day long and cell phones all day long. And okay, my kid's quiet. He's out of my hair because, I've worked all day and maybe I'm working on my master's or whatever.
Yep.
So, okay, fine. Let's let TV raise our kids and let's let video games raise our kids. And by the time we woke up and was like, wait a minute, maybe I should put some parental controls on their phone. It's too late because the kids figure out how to get around the parental controls, or they figure out how to go buy a burner phone, right? Or they figure out all of the stuff, or they act like they are literally going to die if we take their cell phones from them. Right?
You've seen the articles about teachers who try and take cell phones from the kids, and they get violent and they get like violently attacked and beat down. And you are so right about the kids being smarter than we are about the technology.
Other thing, I think the most insidious thing is the parents who are trying to be their kids' friend. Right?
Yes.
My parents at no stage in my life have been my friend. Right? They've always been mom and dad. They'll always be mom and dad. They've never gone to the club with me, or they've never, did any of the other stuff, right? They've always been mom and dad. But now we're the generation who's trying to be our kids' friend, trying to be cool, trying to have the cool parties with our friends or entertain, and so we've gone wrong a million ways.
Now, Jeremy said, now I'm gonna give you the other side. Jeremy said he started this by saying, is it this or that? You gave the one side. I think it's both. So I don't disagree with anything you said, but he's also right that you mentioned it too, Christy, outside influences that other people didn't have to deal with, other parents didn't have to deal with. And we can talk about technology, which Jeremy mentioned, but it's not even only the technology, right? It's just the way we communicate. Will talked about the lack of communication because people don't, these young kids don't know how to do all these different social skills. But there's another factor. You got to think, now obviously there's people who a little bit later, a little bit earlier, but if you're talking Gen X, he's specifically talking about Gen X parents, right? What kind of parents were we? To be fair, the youngest Gen Xer is 44, right? So that means the average one is early 50s. I say that to say most of them don't have young kids, right? So the Gen X's really were the parents of these terrible parents that are out there, right? So if you had a kid at 24, right? Your kid's 20 or 30 now, right? They're raising these young kids that are in school. Maybe you have a few, you have two left in high school. My kid's younger. I was older. But on average, you were born in the 70s, your kids are grown, right? So a lot of those parenting problems are really another generation beyond, even when it comes to that. Right. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I will say, I mean, I think a lot of Gen Xers, especially if you're kind of educated and you have a career, I think they did kind of wait, though. I think a lot of Gen Xers.
Yeah, but they didn't wait to 40s.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Not most.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Some did.
I think some did. And by the way, I feel bad for those people. I mean, I have, I don't want to say, my son's in the other room, so I'll say this quietly, but, I have two daughters in college, which means, again, I'm impoverished right now. And, I got 4 more years and then I'm finally an empty nester. But, her point is just, it's so brilliant that about being the friends of our children, but I would think it's even broader than that. I mean, I don't know about you guys. When I look at these, like the things at Columbia, my daughter goes to Berkeley, my other daughter goes to Emory, so like my daughters have been, yeah, I know. And it's not just that they're ignorant, as Will says, it's that they're so damn self-righteous about it at the same time, and I think we have just fetishized youth so much as if like being young gives you some kind of value or power. It doesn't. I mean, to a certain degree, sit down, shut up. You don't know much. You're just parroting what the chic, cool, avant-garde professor is saying, and it's impoverishing them. And that's really, again, we talk about how we talk about how we want to be friends with our kids, but you know what? I think a lot of teachers do that too. By the way, a lot of if you want to write something that's really controversial, and I don't have the cojones to write it. By the way, I don't have the guts to say it. But if you look at the way that young teachers, like Gen Z teachers, look at the profession, they see it in very social emotional terms. They see themselves as advocates. They see themselves as, talking about, I went to I don't want to get too off field here, but I went to a professional development thing. I hadn't gone to one in years because I'm actually busy teaching in the classroom. And I went to one. Oh my God. It was like every stereotype in the history of the world where they're teaching 8th graders about intersectionality and this potpourri of identities. And you literally just say, but you can't read. You don't know the difference between a country and a continent. What the heck are you doing? Because we're trying to, because the problem is we're obsessed with egalitarianism. Parents are not the equals of their children. Stop pretending. Teachers are not the equals of their students. Stop pretending. But we want to be egalitarian. We want to be cool. We want to be their friends. And I just think that's a great point that you make.
But this is one last thing I got to say, because we got to sell some of your books. We got to talk about your books. But I got to say, this is a perfect tie-in, because I was going to mention something. I got a teacher here. The book is Liberty, so lessons in liberty.
Yeah.
And then you talked about these young teachers, perfect. So my point was, when I was talking about the Gen X parents, yes, they did some damage, the devices and all that stuff. And then I was going to mention the very thing you talked about. They're not really listening. They're on the social media and all that stuff. And the one time that they look up for a moment is when they're in school, because they have to, and look at who we have teaching them. So you teach government and U.S. history. It's a history of just government. What do you teach?
I teach government in the first semester and macroeconomics in the second.
Right. So government econ. So this is a perfect segue to both the lessons and what you're talking about. So my kids in class, they're doing, this week, they were doing child rights was the unit they were studying. So for a whole week they were studying and they had to do research on it. And I knew where it was going. So this is the problem with what they do, right? It's like on the surface, what they're teaching is not bad, but that there has to be some ideology, or you got to leave some things out. They're 8-year-olds. How much are you really teaching them? 8-year-olds, by the way, Jeremy, 8-year, not AP seniors. And so my son asked, because, he has wise parents that teach him well, where do the rights come from? Anybody want to guess where the teacher told him the rights came from? I knew it was going to be bad. It was worse than I thought. Anybody? Where do rights come from?
I don't suppose they said nature and nature's God.
They didn't say that. So where did it come from? Anybody?
Probably from government is what they said, if I had to guess.
The consensus of the people that decided to make them up and apply them to the citizens, probably. I mean, that's the other option, really. Like, where's the right to vote come from? You know, quite arguably not nature.
The UN in 1989.
Whoa, that's a new one.
So apparently, since Jeremy alluded to he was, guilty of ageism earlier. Apparently, I never had rights as a child because that's the year I graduated high school. So I turned 18 when kids get rights. I have no words.
I have no words for that.
So you're talking about rights for kids? Like, are they talking about like the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child or something like that?
Yeah, that's what they're talking about.
Oh, okay.
But they're teaching it to an eight-year-old, so they're not going to know the difference. They're saying that's when people get rights. That's when children get rights in 1989.
And that's
just before that, there were no rights. Debate about whether rights do come from our recognition of rules created by God, or whether the voting majority of people in a society just vote on them. I mean, like the right.
But if it was voted on them,
probably doesn't come from Allah. Well, no, the answer your kid got was bullshit. I'm just thinking about that in terms of how I would teach that to kids. Like, no, the rights don't come from the United Nations, and that no, I mean it's an interesting take on one side of the debate.
Right. And I think what Will's talking about, there's a difference between natural rights and political rights, right? So, natural rights are, kind of when we're talking about the foundation of a civilization that believes in classical liberalism, right. We're talking about nature. If we're talking about how are we going to apply that and codify it, then you start talking about the Constitution, right? You talk about civil rights and political rights. But you're sure it's like not talking about the United Nations. That's definitely not what you're talking about. And again, that drives me mad because that there's some kind of because those kids. Well, first of all, they'll probably forget everything they learned. Let's
of course.
Be honest. But here's the thing, and this is the thing I've learned the hard way about being a teacher, is that you don't get to control what your students remember about you. I can't tell you when I was a young teacher, I did some stupid crap. Like I kid you not, they always got, because I was 22 years old, 23, and I wanted to be kind of, liked by the kids. And they recruited me to do the rallies. And there is, I thank God there's no cameras, because I was literally doing the oops, I did it again, Britney Spears in the red cat suit dance at the school rallies. You know what I mean? Like, and it is so demoralizing because students who are now 41 years old will say, oh, I remember you. Do they remember the great lessons about the Federalist Papers? No, but they damn well remember the Britney Spears dance in the middle of the rally. So you don't get to control what the students remember. So who knows what they're going to, who knows what they're going to take from the class. It's very embarrassing. When you teach as long as I have, if I see kids from the first few years of my teaching career, I go the other way because I'm embarrassed.
Nice. So the people you wrote about that we were learning these lessons from, the 30 lessons, 10 people. Yeah. You have George Washington, Daniel Inouye, Clara Barton, Thomas Jefferson, scratch that one out, Arthur Ashe, Abraham Lincoln, Ben Nighthorse Campbell, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, James Madison, and TR. So that's a pretty impressive broad list. Yeah. I know some of the people are trying to cancel some of them, but you're saying you're bold enough to say there's something to learn from all of them. George Washington is going to teach us to have good manners. Daniel's going to say, be a joiner. Clara Barton's going to say, it's not someone else's problem. Arthur Ashe is a good one. Don't let other people pick your fights. Oh, and of course, my favorite was TR said, always take the stairs.
Yeah.
So these are things that basically these aren't things that they said, right? This is the way they lived their lives. These are things that they were pretty dogmatic about. And talk a little bit about why you think these lessons from these people were so important.
Well, in education, we have our own kind of vernacular. And one of the things that we talk about is actionable. We want advice to be actionable. We want it to be practical. I'm sure some of your listeners, I'm sure you have an educated audience, but, the founding fathers really loved a Greek historian by the name of Plutarch. And Plutarch's Lives was probably the most important book of self-help in human history. And all it was just a biography of the extraordinary Greeks and Romans from 2,000 years ago. And yet, if you go back at the greatest generation in human history, and I know maybe this isn't a popular opinion, but I do believe it's the founding fathers. When you look at the correspondence and the writings and the debates of a Washington and Adams, a Jefferson and Madison, a Monroe, a Hamilton, a Franklin, a Gouverneur Morse, you look at the way they thought of themselves. they looked back in history and said, you know what, I want to be like those guys. I'm inspired by what they did. And I want to kind of take that idea and manifest it in my own life and in my own time. And what I'm really trying to do, and again, I know I'm just a high school teacher, I am trying to be an American Plutarch. I am trying to say, look, young people reflexively say, I don't want to look at anything before 2015 because their opinions are different than mine. But my gosh, the founding fathers, they were inspired by people who lived 2,000 years ago. Look what they were on the other side of. They were on the other side of Christianity, the fall of Rome, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, 2 world wars. And yet they understood that as human beings, we really haven't changed that much. That the things that allow us to be inspired and to flourish in our lives are the same things as they were when Aristotle was talking about not just living, but living well. And so I picked these 10 people because they are our people, right? These are people in our history, and they had freedom, and they used it in meaningful ways to find happiness, to find purpose, to find the joy that so many people aren't finding today. I mean, the very first lesson in the book is George Washington. And he, George Washington was the kind of first self-help president. He had this idea. It's a very enlightened idea, very Enlightenment idea that, all of us are a piece of clay. We're not marble, right? It's not just nature. It's also nurture. That we alone in the animal kingdom, we can imagine the kind of men or women we want to be. And then we can do things to get there, that we can aspire to being that man or that woman. And then we put our head down and we get to work and we get a little bit closer every single day. We use our liberty to do that. And here's the thing, Charles, there's never a bad time in life to be better. I mean, this is what I say to my seniors who have checked out is, look, guys, there's never a good day to be ignorant. There's never a good day to be rude. There's never a good day to be checked out. And there's never a bad day to grow. I mean, I don't care if you're 8 years old or you're 80, we can always know more. We can always be more virtuous. We can always climb higher. And that ethic of using life as a chance to get better every single day, that's why I put it as the very first one.
Wow. Well, Will, if you look at some of these people that he's writing about, they're impressive. The points he's making are good. He's a great writer. And he writes in a way, I mean, these are big lies. So he picks the points that it's almost like a movie. You want to lean into it. But is there a chance that it could backfire, that it's too big? I mean, he's got a guy who got shot on a campaign trail that just wiped the blood off his chest and went to speak, whose mother and wife died the same day, and he kept going. He's got a guy who's like, I don't, you have to keep your appearances no matter what. You always, you look and act in a certain moral way. You hold yourself up to a certain regard. You got a Japanese American who was, a military guy who interned and all that kind of stuff, made it to the Senate and still spoke out vocally about loving the country and how you have to uphold the republic. That's a lot, right? That's not, I mean, are people going to read this and say, yeah, look at the lessons, but these people aren't normal. These are like, superhuman in some respects.
Well, I mean, I think it depends what you mean. So, like, I was looking at moral codes, not my normal offline activity, but I'm writing an essay about this the other day. I mean, so like I have the 9 noble virtues of, the Norsemen and the Greeks on my screen right now. And it's a pretty good list. I mean, and notice all of these, like the 10 Commandments, the Eightfold Way, they're pretty similar in length, pretty similar in content. But you've got courage, perseverance, honor, self-reliance, that kind of thing. I think that what those things mean is going to be different for each individual. So, I mean, like you're talking about the situation where Teddy Roosevelt, right, got shot. He was running for president under the Bull Moose Party banner. I think someone just shot him, walked up with a little pistol and shot him in the chest. And he basically leaned forward and then, recovered, pulled the bullet out.
At the guy's face. Say, bring that guy over here. I want to take a look at him.
No, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose, you son of a bitch. And then gave his speech. And I mean, that's one of the great.
And they said he was lying and he showed him. Oh, you think I'm lying, huh?
Yeah. But I mean, I think if your idea is, okay, well, my focus for the next year is going to be on the virtue of perseverance as I try to continue my athletic career in college or something. No one's expecting you to do exactly what Teddy Roosevelt did. Right. Or Geronimo or something like that. The point is that this is the virtue. This is an illustration of it, and this is how to pursue it. And no, I actually think that was well done in the book. Really, the idea. Now, one of the things that devoutly religious people would probably disagree with, say, me on, is that I think that there are actually a number of paths toward the light, quote unquote, that work about equally well. I mean, if you look at mental health among Buddhists, Stoics, so you can go through 10 or 15 other groups of people, it's quite similar. So individual choice is going to determine which way you decide to go, so on down the line. But people need a guiding story to motivate them usually. And you always need to understand what you're trying to do. That's 100%. That's universal. So I think illustrating, if you want to continue moving forward, you're going to need what we used to call perseverance. This is a good example. No, I think it was well done here, but that's always a good idea. And it's just, without rambling on, it's amazing how few people, without being taught by someone else, just naturally arrive at some of these ideas. When I was a younger man early in life, I'd often feel like there must be some tool, some strategy I could use to get through the situation without, say, a confrontation. There's a virtue of temperance in all the major codes. And there are different ways you can express that. But for most people, for people that aren't outlier geniuses and saints, you need someone to teach that to you. So no, it's well done. You're not expected in day-to-day life to be as brave as like Roland Martell. But the reason you have those hero stories is that you can read what happened there and think, okay, well, there have been people that have stood against 10,000 warriors of the other side. This is, the virtue of courage. Maybe I can express that when it comes to, asking Jenny out or, standing up to my stepfather or, whatever the case might be. So the idea is a good one. No one's expected to do as much as the great historic heroes.
And Jeremy, what do you think? He talked about perseverance. What do you think? How much would you say trials in life, though they're norms and we all have them, but play a part in all that? I mean, because Teddy's the one, if you talk about the lessons, whose lesson was pretty much directly that, right? Taking the stairs, you must take the hard way. But with the exception, I mean, everybody has trials, but with the exception of maybe Ruth Bader Ginsburg, everybody on the list had like major things that a lot of the people today would stop living for, wives, children dying young, being, put in an internment camp, having physical injury, all that kind of thing. So they all overcame something in addition to what they were doing. So what part do you think that plays?
Well, I mean, I think it's pivotal. I mean, Will just talked about temperance. Well, another Roman virtue is fortitude. That strength is found in a kind of reserve of your humanity that sometimes you don't know is there. And I would say, by the way, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think, had trials and tribulations. I mean, her husband, Marty, was at Harvard and as a young man, as a young couple, was diagnosed with testicular cancer, right. And she went into his classes for him at Harvard, took notes, right? Helped him do the papers, was raising baby Jane at the same time. And I think it's interesting that, years later, she transfers to Columbia and she graduates one in her class. And I think that, what everybody, and this is, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think anybody who's reached their 40s and 50s kind of begins to realize that.
No one here.
Yeah, nobody's here. Hey, nobody here, of course. But when you're in your 40s and 50s, you kind of look back at who you were your 20s and you say, look, you're going to have pain and you're going to have disappointment in a way that you can't possibly describe to a 20-year-old. And that pain and that suffering, you can either use it as a way of kind of socking it in, or you can use it as a way of becoming a better version of yourself. When I look at my own life, and I look at I had a sibling who died when I was very, very young. My wife and I lost pregnancies. My father had a horrible death a few years ago. All of these awful things. But here's the thing: we're not special, right? That happens to all of us. And when we talk about these people, yes, they are incredible people. And I understand your question about do you kind of do a disservice by saying, well, they're incredible. Of course they could do these things. But, it's so easy. It's so easy. And this is what the academy does. No offense to any college professors here. This is what the left does a lot, is it's very, very easy to look at totality of a human life and to pick on what people got wrong. Right. That is so easy to do. And what I want to do in this book is not to say that Thomas Jefferson got everything right. God, we know he didn't. Arthur Ashe didn't get everything right. None of these people got everything right. And if you're writing a biography about these people, then go write a 1,000-page biography and include it all. This book is about what you got right? And what you got right is essentially the pillar upon which we can stand to forge a better life for ourselves. And that's why, none of us get out of this easily, man. I mean, all of us have our trials and our tribulations. I'll be honest, Charles. Here I am. I'm talking about the book. Here it is. And this is the book I've been wanting to write my entire life. Like, this is literally when I started this writing journey over 20 years ago. This is the book that I wanted to write. And right now I'm nervous. I'm nervous. It comes out on Tuesday. And at the end of the day, I could get the contract, write the book, be on the podcast, do all the great things. And at the end of the day, it still might fail. Right. And that's a hard lesson to observe. That's a hard lesson to internalize. And yet, as Teddy Roosevelt said, we Americans, we go into the arena. No matter how bad it is, we go into the arena. We're not critics. We don't criticize. Right. You continue to go into the arena.
Hold that up again. That's a nice looking book. I wish I had.
I like that.
I wish I had one of those.
You see that,
Christy? You see I know you're still working your way through. Oh, look at that, Wilford Riley,
right in the very bottom.
I saw that.
Yeah. Now I would have put it on the very top, Will, but I had no choice. Sorry, bud.
Yeah, they don't. The editor doesn't necessarily ever share, our genius. But I agree with you. Great minds think alike. Now you're also coming out with HarperCollins, right?
Yep.
Broadside.
Yep. Broadside.
No, that's gonna be a big book.
Yep.
Like, I've seen my discussion of what the print run's going to be and so on. Like, that book probably will have a pretty significant impact.
I do. I hope so. I do think it's probably like a slow burn book. Like she was talking about how she's going to buy it for her children, and I do think it's a word of mouth book. I think it would be a great guest right before Memorial Day. Just if you ask me. But nobody's asking me on TV right now, so there we go.
Well, I'll do my part. I took the last book and schlepped it around, and
one of my life goals is I'm going to go to the U.S. Open, and I'm going to take Charles Love, and I'm going to pay for the best seat. People are going to think we're friggin' celebrities because we're going to have such awesome seats.
You do realize we're recording this, right?
No, I'm doing it. I'm coming to New York. We're going to the U.S. Open because, again, I got to go to Arthur Ashe Stadium, by the way. I love Arthur Ashe. One of the cool things about the book is, when you teach political science, I've known a lot about Teddy Roosevelt and James Madison and George Washington, for a lot of my life. Of course, I learned more. But I really loved kind of getting deep into the weeds about Daniel Inouye and
I was going to ask you some of the more interesting ones that you.
I loved that. It was so enjoyable. And Arthur Ashe, my God, truly one of the most incredible Americans to have ever lived. And you want to know something? Again, I'm not trying to. You're going to accuse me of being ageist. People under 35 have no idea who he is. Nope. Like, even educated have no idea who Arthur Ashe is. It's a tragedy.
Wow.
Chrissy, I know you're still working through, but did you have any lessons?
Yeah, actually,
the 30 lessons that you really liked?
Well, I was taking some notes while y'all were talking, so I wouldn't forget. One thing, Jeremy, that I heard this quote today, that people will shout your failures and whisper your success. And so I think what you did in this book is the opposite. You're really highlighting like the success and like the key nuggets that we should take away from these people. Because for me, I'm going to whisper this, but I still like RBG, right? I don't care what my politics are compared to what they used to. There are still things about her that I admire and I like. So I like the fact that you're like, hey, in this book, you talked about how, all of the Supreme Court justices, they eat together and they actually have these friendships despite party lines, because you never know what you can learn from one another if you just get out of your box. So that was one, thing that I did pull away from her that we don't do nowadays. I don't know if, the Supreme Court justices are crossing lines and actually friends with each other, or people in Congress. I don't know if, I think we saw that big cat fight this week, right? That can probably say that's not really happening, that they're not really, crossing those party lines. And so I was a history major. I was one of those people that, I knew I was going to law school. So they were like, major in what you like. And I loved history. But of course, I've kind of gotten away from reading anything historical. I'm still plowing through the Team of Rivals, right? It's a thick book, so I'm still plowing through it, But I think this might be the kind of book for adults that could strike a match. Like, these are historical figures that I never knew about. what other Americans can I dig into? So maybe it might strike a match and realize like how much we don't know about our own history and maybe strike a love of history. I mean, so I think that this book could do that.
Without a doubt, Jeremy will tell you that I called him up. I was reading the book. I'm like, this is really good. I've read 3 chapters. I like this one. Oh, that one was really good. And like you, I called. I'll tell the actual conversation. So I called Jeremy. I said, Jeremy, I'm not like to my own horn, but I'm a pretty bright guy, right? He's like, yeah. I said, I read a lot. He's like, yeah. I said, I got to chapter 10, and I've read biographies of TR. And so he opens by telling them, if there's one biography I tell my kids to read, and I had not read that one, so I stopped reading this book to go read that TR biography. And you should read it because it's freaking phenomenal.
I mean, Edmund Morris. I mean, the Rise of Theodore Roosevelt might be. It's so good. I mean, words.
You have to read it and listen to the audiobook because the voices in the audiobook and them do.
I haven't.
It's better than a movie. You have to listen to it.
Well, I mean, I've probably bought that. As I said in the book, I mean, the Edmund Morris estate owes me money because I bought so many copies of that book for students. But I love what you were saying, by the way, about kind of sampling. You know, that my chapters are kind of a sample of what people got right. And if you want to go dig in, if you want to go read, Doris Kearns Goodwin and read The Team of Rivals, do it. I mean, I kind of think a little bit as you were saying that. I was thinking, my book is kind of like a cruise ship. I don't know if you guys have ever gone on a cruise, but you go to all these destinations and you go for like one day. Right. You go to one day and you're not going to dig that deep. It's more like, well, I want to go back to this port, 3 or 4 days someday. And that's kind of what the book is. It's if you want to dig deeper into the life of James Madison, feel free. If you want to dig deeper into the life of RBG, feel free. And I also love what you said about RBG. I mean, I just, one of the great things about our time, great in a bad way, is just how bad we are at conversations. I mean, I have learned so much as an American by having friends on the opposite side of the political aisle than I am. And those conversations just really aren't happening like they used to. And there are so many. I mean, and I wonder, do people kind of feel the kind of the inner cockles of your soul? Do they feel inspired like they do for me when I read about the fact that, that Antonin Scalia and RBG, would go on vacations together, or they would have operas together. I love the fact that the night that Reagan was shot, that Tip O'Neill went to his bedside, and prayed for his life. I love to read in Team of Rivals how these men who were Lincoln's opponents in 1860 came to believe that when he talked about appealing to the better angels of your nature and talking about the mystic chords of memory, that he was binding them up in his life. And they were so fiercely loyal to him. I mean, I find some of these moments so deeply enchanting and mesmerizing. And I just feel like they're not being told to young people because they're being told all the negativity, all the trash. They're being told a narrative about what America is rather than what it can be. And that's what, and so I love what Charles said in that first conversation. Charles was probably the first person to read the book outside of me and a friend and my editor. And, it is very nerve wracking because, you sometimes, you guys are authors, sometimes you read it and you're like, God, I'm a genius. And then sometimes you write it and you're like, oh my God, I'm trash. What am I doing? And you you really don't know how to feel about it. And I've tried to really pick out nuggets that really are not all that well known, like, Lincoln's, 1855 Senate race, or, a lot of people don't know about, the fact that when Lincoln stepped up to give his second inaugural speech, that literally the clouds cleared and the sun shone on him like a spotlight. Like, I'm not making that up. That really happened. Martin Luther King really, the night before he was shot, he really did give a speech extemporaneously and say, I'm not going to get there, but I've seen the promised land and you're going to get there. I mean, geez, these are incredible stories. Everybody should know them. And it's hard to be a cynic about America when you know them.
Well, one thing about you saying that the cruise ship analogy is terrible. Cruises suck, so I can edit that part out. But one thing I hope for the book is that, like you say, that people will get enough of them because you write so well. And in addition to all that, there's also like action in them that they'll make, like I did with TR. Maybe they'll go and they'll find out more, not just about them, but about others. Because like I said, if you just don't like history and don't care, and you're just reading this for interest, there's little things like you talk about it's little stuff, the way George Washington rode a horse, right? The fact that, he was what was he, 6'3", 6'4", but he appeared 6'8" because he stood above everybody when he walked in a room, and that he's riding his horse and everybody's, attacking him, all this stuff is going on, and it's like, I don't think this man can be knocked off his horse. It's that kind of imagery. It's watching little, on the opposite end, little James Madison, right? How he's like, I'm so smart, I'm gonna be like, this Svengali in the background, that I'm going to make these things happen, but I'm going to let other people take credit for it. I'm going to let them do what they do best, and I'm going to control it from a different way. I mean, Ben Nighthorse Campbell, that chapter was interesting too. That he was the one I knew the least about. But then the last thing I want to say is, earlier I said that everybody had trials. Another thing they all had in common, they were all voracious readers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, from TR reading a book a day, the lesson we can learn from Lincoln was about reading, but all of them, and you talk about Jefferson and the founders and how they harken back. Everybody, obviously, RBG, everyone read. So, I mean, that's something that's going away. Maybe somebody will read the book and be inspired to read again.
C.S. Lewis has this great quote where he says, "We read to know that we are not alone." And that's such a brilliant point there, Charles, is that, I mean, reading is the one thing that opens up the galaxy for us, right? Reading is the one thing that we realize. I mean, what is the central, I mean, again, I'm not trying to get too philosophical, but what is the central tragedy of being a human being? We get one brain, one set of eyes, one set of ears. We're born in one place to one set of parents. And so we have a really limited sense of what could be in a human life, but there's one thing that saves us from it, and it's reading, right? It's the fact that if you can read, then you can be a president, you can be an explorer, you can live 2,000 years ago, right? You can do all these things if you can read. And and that's why, I did anchor one of the Lincoln lessons about the fact that reading can have a very practical effect. I mean, Lincoln, of any American who ever lived, Lincoln had a very strong sense that he was meant to something greater than himself. I mean, some of us all have a sense of possibilities. But maybe that's just ego. Maybe that's just vanity. But Lincoln, when he was reading Shakespeare, when he was reading the Bible, I really feel like he understood that there is a practical side to reading, which is to deepen your soul for a potential and a possibility that you can't see in the moment. So, I mean, again, Jefferson said a room without books is like a body without a soul, and I couldn't agree more. And I mean, so many of my students don't read. They just won't read. My son won't read. And they'll tell you it's because they don't have the attention span for it, right? It's destroyed their attention span. I mean, guys, my kids, I wonder if your children are the same there, because they don't watch movies because they don't have the attention span, much less read, an 8,000 word article in the Atlantic or something. And it's just impoverishing their souls, and it's weakening their minds. And so what was my solution to all this? Write a book.
Well, you're doing your part to hopefully turn it around. And if you're wondering how good of a writer he is, Jeremy and I are friends, and I talk to him regularly, and he actually quotes people when you talk to him like that. That's literally how he talks. You could be like, "What do you want to have for lunch?" Well, as the great historian once said,
"This is not true. Not true. Just wait till we go to the U.S. Open, man. I'm going to be rowdy and crazy."
It is recorded. I'm just going to take that clip, snippet, and keep playing it over and over until I get my ticket.
Okay. But, you want me to make a real promise? Are you ready? You ready?
Well, that wasn't real?
No. I'm going to give you more specific. You ready?
Okay.
If this book ever makes a bestseller list, I will do it in the next 2 U.S. Opens. Deal?
Deal.
How
many copies does that mean I have to buy, Will?
Typically they say
to make the bestseller list, you normally have to sell about 4,000.
How many do I have to buy when I can figure it's going to sell some, and then
you got maybe like 200, 300.
Yeah, that's not bad. I say
you got to chip in there. Got to do like 5%.
Because I can't spend more, Christy. I can't spend more than I would buy on the tickets to the ticket.
The advantage the damn liberals have is the libraries.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean,
that's true. Yeah. That's a great point. Well,
but this is not political.
That's true. It's not. But
everybody requested in your library. The library, surprisingly, will put the book in the library if you ask for it. Just ask for it.
I didn't know. I have 3 kids, so I'm going to buy 3.
Okay. Well,
those are my. That's on my tab, Jeremy. Those are my 3.
I'll do some promo for it. I mean, if you tweet anything, I'll boost that out there. I'm not going to buy like a stack of 25 books.
That's okay. Hey, you know what?
I might for a class actually, but not right now.
If you could use your Twitter celebrity, that would be the best thing in the world for me. But Will, I've always heard, because your book's
of course, man, celebrity, niche internet micro celebrity.
I am not kissing your butt. You are truly a ninja on Twitter. I mean, like there's just a capacity that I just don't have for it.
Jeremy, if I had $5 for every guest who came on this podcast and said I'm a fan of Will's, we would be going to the U.S. Open because I could buy the books.
Yeah. Well, see, I've always heard, by the way, Will, that the number is 3,000. Like if you can sell 3,000 before your book comes out in that first week, you got a good shot. That's always kind of what
you need an extra a buffer for the New York Times.
Actually, I was curious about this because it sounded like a lot of people were just bullshitting. So I actually asked to see some of their analytics, and I mean, we didn't go in depth into the numbers. Like they didn't give me any confidential sort of information, but it seems like between the first week and pre-sales, you'd need to sell about 4.
Okay. Well,
to really get on there. And there also are a lot of questions. Are the best which bestseller list?
Oh, well,
I'd like to be. Yeah, I'd like to be top 10 on Amazon. I think that's doable. But I don't think I'm going to make the New York Times bestseller list. I think there's going to be some reason that doesn't happen.
You can't. Your book is literally titled the lies my liberal teacher told me. You can sell 1 million copies, and you're not making that list.
I know. I disagree with all of you. First of all, Mark Levin wrote a book called American Marxism that was on there as number 1 for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. So the
NYT.
Yeah, in the NYT. But we all know that NYT that there is a subjective factor. They'll kind of, if you're an MSNBC host,
you have to outsell the wave.
Yeah, but no, I like I said, when I'm talking about is Eric Nelson had the great guy over there at Broadside. He had a tweet that said about 3,000 is typically what it is. So that's kind of where I'm getting my number. I don't know, but
3,000 it is, people. 3,000.
Charles,
they can buy it now, right? Buy it
now. People need to go out and buy the book. That's the important point. I mean, if it's 4, it's even more pressing to buy 4 copies or whatever. I mean, so that's really the thing. Just, people have to go out there and buy books. You're doing it for America. You're doing it for the people. You're doing it for me and Jeremy. This is a great cause.
Doing it so I can go to the U.S. Open. Jeremy Adams.
Are you a fan of tennis, Charles?
I played competitive tennis for a while. I'm a big fan of tennis. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And which is crazy, by the way, I'm a huge tennis fan. I've actually never been to a professional tennis match, which is just crazy. So I want to go with Charles. That's who I want to go with.
Look at that. Let's make that happen. He is Jeremy Adams, author of the new book coming out Tuesday, Lessons in Liberty. Go buy 5 copies. If not for the country, for me. Jeremy, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, guys. You're the best. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jeremy.
God, get all of the praise. I got a country to save because I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.